Blog Talk Radio.
Great Saturday morning, family. It is such a pleasure to be back with House Talk Pregame. I am your empowerment coach and inspirational speaker, Dr. Lauren Pitts. I'm really excited, as always, to share this platform with my co-host, Jared Johnston from Bowie State and Ronnie Ransome from Virginia State. And we are hoping that come basketball season, when we make that shift, that my son, Andre Garlick from Drexel University, will be able to join us as well. Look, folks, we are at a time and place and space in our lives where family, in my opinion, personally and professionally, is more important now than ever before. And that really is what House Talk Pregame is all about. It's about family. It's about us showing some serious love to our own families, to our HBCU family, student and professional athletes, their families, and really everybody that we invest in and that invest in us. We've been telling you all season about how excited we are that our House Talk Pregame family has grown, as we are now a part of the Heritage Sports Radio Network family. And now you can catch us every Saturday on HSRN at 11 a.m. So we're doing dual broadcast here, folks. So really excited about that. So we are at 11 a.m. on on Blog Talk and on HSRN. And you can also catch the rebroadcast on Heritage Sports Radio Network on Saturday nights at 10 o'clock. We will be switching live to HSRN on Saturday morning for our shows, and we'll let you know when that's happening, but it will be real soon. As I was reading just so much information this week and watching the news, Jared and Ronnie, COVID-19 is absolutely ravaging the athletic world. Even the Big Ten schools, that are playing, reading about the NBA and stuff, like literally it is just decimating the athletic world. And I wanted to make sure that we noted that, because I don't want people to think that we're insensitive to what's going on with this virus. It is impacting our families, my own family up close and personal. Just in this past week, we suffered the devastating loss of a loved one, and it's almost too much. It's almost too much. So I just wanted to take that moment to let the world know that we here at House Talk Pregame are not insensitive to how this virus is impacting our own families and the families of you, our listening audience, and know that our thoughts and prayers are with you. We love you even though we don't know you. We are family, and we care about you, and we are praying for you, and we are praying for this nation, that we are able to get this virus under control, because there's just too many lives being lost every day. Turning it over to you, Jared.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And like I said, we send our condolences to her and her family. And like we're not immune with. I myself had a family member unfortunately pass away from COVID as well. So, we're praying that everybody stays safe through this time with the holiday season coming up. You enjoy it, but you're still safe. And for everybody out there who is, maybe this is your first time tuning in to House Talk Pregame, we're here to kind of help people cope with the times that we're in, to give people an outlet to talk about what's going on with the raw times we're living in. We focus heavily on HBCUs, sports, and life in general. And, we're here to make new discoveries, share our truth as people, and every week we try to be as transparent with you guys as possible so you guys can get the most out of this hour and a half. We know that some of you guys may be tired. We know you care, and we're ready to, help you guys get through it as it helps us as well. So you got it, Ronnie.
Thank you, Jared. And good morning to everybody. Hope everybody's having a great Saturday so far. And as Jared said, my condolences and prayers are with Dr. Pitts and her families. My condolences with you as well, Jared. Fortunately for, me and my family, we have not, to my knowledge, had anybody who's been exposed to COVID or has had COVID. So I'm going to knock on wood for that. And, my prayers are that everybody out there listening continues to take the precautions necessary to stay safe, washing your hands, wearing your mask, making sure you're eating, fruits and vegetables and foods that's going to help boost your immune system and, stay away from the processed sugars and things like that cause inflammation in your bodies. With everything that's going on, we have to, remain as healthy as possible and, just enjoy each day while we still have them. But during today's show, we will welcome call-in questions and comments by simply dialing direct at 515-605-9744 or email your HBCU shout-outs, questions, or comments to htpregame@gmail.com. Back to you, Dr. Pitts.
Thanks. So every week, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is making sure that you, our listening family, are aware of mental health issues and mental wellness strategies, because as Ronnie said, it is so important that we do our level best to stay as healthy as possible during this time. And we recognize that mental illness is a stigma in Black and brown communities. And particularly now with everything that is going on with COVID-19, we recognize that COVID-19 is taking its toll on the psychological well-being of our families. Let's face it, folks are coming unglued. And we had said last week that we wanted to take a closer look at substance use and abuse among our families. And last week we touched on drug use and abuse. And this week we're going to talk about alcohol use and abuse. When we look at the prevalence of mood-altering substances, particularly on campus, right, we know that alcohol, marijuana, narcotics, stimulants, depressants, hallucinogens, they've been tracked by campus prevention professionals for decades, and they evoke varying degrees of effort and success to reduce use and negative consequences. And when we look at what that looks like among college students, including student athletes, we find that they are susceptible to what we call the college effect, in which heavy and frequent alcohol use increases when students arrive on campus, which fortunately, unfortunately and fortunately, buys into the cultural myth that campus life is about alcohol abuse and drug use. The issue with that, though, folks, is that these beliefs result in an increase in negative impact on academic success, increased risk of sexual assault, and other interpersonal violence and other negative consequences. Student athletes, compared with other students on campus, report higher rates of heavy episodic drinking, sometimes referred to as binge drinking. And I know that both of you have touched on that in not just in last week's show, but in previous shows too. And let me define for you all what binge drinking is. It's defined as 4 or more drinks for women and 5 or more drinks for men. Even more disturbing is that 1 in 5 male student athletes who use alcohol report drinking 10 or more drinks in an outing when they drink. And fellas, what that takes me back to, I want to take a step back for a moment from college life. Yeah, real talk, my friends, my closest friends, like I was entrenched in engaging with student athletes all through high school, and they drank each other under the table. And don't let us win. Oh, my goodness. Folks were drunk off their butts. And that was high school. So why should we be naive in thinking that that was going to change when folks hit college? You know, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And when we look at alcohol use and abuse within the context of mental health, there's no doubt that many issues arise and they co-occur with mental illness. And we need to be aware. There was a study done by Harvard University that described patterns of depression and alcohol abuse among young adults in college and confirmed that a substantial fraction of college youth are experiencing poor mental health. At any given time, approximately 5% said that they engaged in high-risk behavior, including alcohol abuse, with depressed youth women at highest risk. This is problematic. And then when you factor in the fact that SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, identified, are you ready? They identified 8.9 million adults have co-occurring mental and substance use disorders and recommends integrating treatment to improve outcomes. So what that says, folks, is that there's this huge opportunity for us to do more in helping not just our student athletes at the high school and collegiate level, but in helping scholar athletes as they transition to adulthood, as they transition into league play for those that go pro. Because what is very, very obvious is that these problems don't just, you don't go and they go away. These problems are pervasive and they are carrying over into adulthood, and we are seeing the manifestations of what that looks like among professional athletes. Ronnie?
Thank you, Dr. Pitts. And as I was listening to you talk, it was just making me think of, when I was in my undergrad years, how heavily we relied on alcohol, to just, for almost everything, whether it was football parties, whether it was, just hanging out. Alcoholism is something that I would think affects a lot of student athletes, especially when you get to college. And if it's something that you necessarily haven't been exposed to when you're growing up, if your families didn't have a lot of alcohol or liquor in the house, you turn 18, 19 years old and you want to go out here and experiment and have fun and things like that. But as you were saying, oftentimes what happens is, we start to use those substances to kind of mask everything. And alcohol is one of the easiest substances to use to mask a lot of problems. Even though I always tell people alcohol only does, but let your heart speak its truth without, any filter or without any, second guessing what you're going to say.
Liquid courage.
We have to be exactly. As student athletes, when you're in school and things like that, you have to be very mindful of having that self-control and having that discipline to not let things get out of hand. Unfortunately, I had, many nights in college where, you get to that point where you're drinking and you start praying and like, God, if you get me out of this, I swear I'll never do it again. And then the next night, God, here we are again, having the same prayer. So some of the coping skills I want to talk about and some of the resources are kind of the similar ones that we talked about last week for the other substance abuse disorders, but it goes hand in hand for alcohol. Of course, number one, building a support system, having those around you who can hold you accountable and, give you the tools necessary to help hold yourself accountable as far as, drinking and things like that. If you're struggling with alcohol abuse and things like that, attending AA meetings, As we were saying earlier, of course, COVID has, kind of hindered, meeting in person. And I think, having these meetings in person probably are a lot more beneficial and helpful. However, they do have online AA meetings that you can attend. So you can make sure you're getting in your meetings. Of course, seeking therapy, counseling. We talked about last week having a relapse prevention plan, which is basically, if you're in remission, you're currently in sobriety and things like that, having that plan in place. Because one thing I talked about last week was a part of recovery is relapse. Not every single person can just go cold turkey and, abstain from the substance they're using for long periods of time. Some people, they might go a couple months and relapse. They might go a year or two and relapse. But as long as you're remaining consistent with that sobriety, that's all that matters. And counseling and therapy can definitely help with that. Exercising is very crucial and very beneficial for you abstaining from using substances. Like I said, exercising can release endorphins in your brain, that feel-good hormone to make you feel good, and also keeping you healthy. Avoiding people and places that can trigger you to use substances, and this is probably the most important one, because, once you realize and you acknowledge that you have an issue, that you have a problem, oftentimes that thing that we use, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, any other type of drugs, oftentimes we don't necessarily do that by ourselves. We do that with other people, and those people are typically close to us in our day-to-day lives and things like that. So part of making those changes and making those sacrifices for a better life is leaving those people and places behind if you know they're not going to respect your sobriety and always have you feeling like, I can't go around them because they're going to make me drink or smoke, or I just can't be at that place because I know what's going to happen. So being able to do that is crucial. And like I said last week, creating hobbies to fill in downtime and to help with stressful events, having something to do outside of working, things like that you enjoy, whether it's going fishing, hunting, exercising, making stuff, doing stuff around the house, whatever it is that you find to make a hobby, definitely doing that. And, of course, last but not least, any form of self-care, to be able to make sure that you're, aware of what's going on with you. I always like to do weekly check-ins with myself or daily check-ins where I ask myself, hey, what's going on? Anything else I need to work on this week and things like that. So always being on top of your self-care will help you dealing with these. Back to you, Dr. Fitz.
So I wanted to add a couple of things as you were talking, Ronnie. It provoked a couple of other thoughts. I wanted to share a stat too. According to a book called Drugs in Sport, the rates for at least occasional heavy alcohol use in professional athletes are similar to the rates for college athletes across all sports. Now that makes sense, right? Because what did I say? It's like, in many instances, these behaviors start in high school and then carry over to college and then carry over to the league. Why? Because nobody's addressing them, right? So when we think about that, we also look at the fact that binge drinking is also more common among athletes compared to the general population. And significant percentages of professional athletes admit to at least one binge drinking episode within the past 6 months. Many high-profile athletes, many high-profile athletes, high-profile professional athletes have been treated for alcohol abuse or alcohol use disorders and drug use too, including 4-time World Series champion Darryl Strawberry has been treated for both alcohol abuse and cocaine abuse. Pro golfer John Daly has struggled with alcohol abuse. Professional football linebacker Thomas Hollywood Henderson has suffered from drug and alcohol abuse. Professional basketball player Ron Tarpley was suspended permanently for alcohol abuse and had prior issues with cocaine abuse. And we mentioned a bunch of others last week, and we know that they're out there because we hear about them all the time. They're tearing up their cars, they're tearing up their families, they're tearing up their relationships. It's costing them their lives. And it goes on and on and on. And I really believe that a major part of that is because it wasn't addressed properly before they even got to the professional level. Because here's the other thing that we know to be true. Athletes, and you all have attested to it, athletes, like many of the individuals who develop alcohol use disorders, generally don't seek out formal treatment on their own. Instead, they're more often forced into treatment by an organizational body, by family, friends, or maybe even team. But again, it's not happening enough, right? Because if it was happening enough, if it was being addressed earlier, if people, family, friends, coaches, trainers, whomever, if the athletic organization was staying on top of it, I mean, we know that everything can't be controlled, but certainly that support system that you spoke about, Ronnie, could be put in place to increase levels of success, I would like to think. And as you also said, it is so important for the support system to be there. Well, why? Because you all travel. You travel extensively during your competitive seasons, and there has to be a social support system in place. There has to be the ability, and if I can be as bold to say, for us as members of the social support system, the athletes have to feel safe and comfortable coming to us so that they can be candid with family, friends, coaches, and fellow players regarding their struggle with alcohol abuse or any other substance. And if we don't create that safe space, how can we think that the scholar athletes and the professional athletes that we love so much are going to be willing to be honest and vulnerable with us and admit that they are imperfect, that they are fallible, and that they are having a difficult time managing this behavior? Look, folks, we came out the gate swinging today. We know that these conversations are important to you. We're not psychic, but we're human. And House Talk Pregame is about meeting you in that place and space of common humanity. We know that these topics that we're touching on week after week after week are up close and personal to you. They are plaguing, if not decimating, your families, your communities. And we want to hear from you because we know that you care. And we know that many of you are suffering in silence, and we don't want you to do that. So we are asking you to join the conversation by calling us live during the show at 515-605-9744. You can email comments and questions to htpregame@gmail.com. Download the Heritage Sports Radio Network app from the App Store and listen to us on Blog Talk or on HSRN. And we also know that it's important to you to keep these conversations growing, because even when you don't call in, we know you're listening. We know that we're impacting your life. We know that we are leading you to the water, and we are providing an overflow of water for you to drink and apply to your lives so that you can have these life-transforming experiences for the better. So you can help us keep these conversations going and growing by your sponsorship with a gift in whatever amount you can afford by visiting drlaurendpitts.com and clicking on the donate button, or you can email us at htpregame@gmail.com to receive a sponsorship packet. We also, if you're in the Virginia area and you are in need of mental health services, we want you to reach out to Ronnie and put forth the effort to get on his caseload. If you are in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, we want you to connect with Jared and buy your house or sell your house through him. If you are in the Atlanta metropolitan area and you need a vehicle, you can reach out to Andre at Landmark Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram of Morrow at 6850 Mount Zion Boulevard in Morrow, Georgia, 30260. It's only 15 miles south of Atlanta, down I-75. Jared, let's hit the ground running and keep it going.
Yes. Yeah, appreciate all of the good info again. Yeah, substance abuse is real. I know. I mean, in college, I thought you were talking about college, but you said high school. I was like, dang, y'all were wild in high school back then.
Yeah, we were. Folks, I ain't even gonna lie. Drugs, alcohol. Look, my drug of choice was always weed. I'm just gonna be trained. Y'all know Dr. Pitts put it out there because can't nobody ever having it say, look, I got cemeteries in my closet. Negative. No, I don't. I put it out there. So if I ever decide to run for a political office, they can't pull up no dirt on me because I put it on the table from the door. I smoked some weed. I got my weed smoking in when I was in high school. I stopped smoking weed my freshman year in college. Ain't smoked weed since. Don't want no part of it. May have an occasional glass of wine now. I like a frozen drink occasionally. But I don't even do that maybe 3 or 4 times a year. But in high school, oh dear goodness, we got some drinking done. And I'm just going to put it out there like I know it to be true. Hung a lot of, around some folk from other cultures that have more money than we did. So, their supply exceeded that of marijuana. Just going to put it like that, and we're going to move on. Just saying.
Some other. That's definitely true. I mean, at Bowie, it was same. I mean, anybody who you going to college, that's just what it is. You just got to be able to manage it at some point. You know what I mean? And not let it affect your schooling or your play on the field. You be throwing up on the field and stuff. But anyway, back to
no throwing up on the field loudly.
I seen it like in warm-ups, like teammates literally in warm-ups throwing up from drinking and stuff like that. Yeah, and it started. It's like 50 degrees outside too. But anyways, we're gonna jump into the shout-outs that we do every week for the HBCUs. Always showing love to our HBCUs. I have 2 today. The first one is Bennett College, which is a private, historically black liberal arts college for women. It is in Greensboro, North Carolina. And it was originally founded, the normal school, and it was purposed to educate freed men and train both men and women as teachers. So it originally started off co-ed, but in 1926, it became strictly a 4-year women's college. They offered 24 majors and 19 minors. And in 1960, which I didn't know, I only thought it was North Carolina A&T students that were conducting the sit-in, but students from Bennett College also joined those from North Carolina A&T to do the civil rights protests in downtown Greensboro. In 2002, the school actually went through major renovations. They had raised about $50 million through a campaign under the leadership of the president, Jonetta B. Cole. So they have, in the last 20 years, seen some major renovations that a lot of HBCUs are starting to see as we go along, which is good. Some notable alumni: Laura Mitchell, she's the superintendent of Cincinnati Public Schools. Sarah Lou Harris Carter, she's the first African-American model woman to be featured in a national poster advertisement campaign in the 1940s for Lucky Strike cigarettes. And then the last one is Belinda J. Foster. She was the first African-American female district attorney in the state of North Carolina. And my second school is Barbara Scotia College. It's an unaccredited HBCU in Concord, North Carolina. It was founded by Reverend Luke Dorland, and it was chartered in 1870. It was built after the Civil War, and this was the first time that it gave black women an alternative to becoming domestic servants or field hands. So they were able to step away from, that type of work after the Civil War. They compete in IA, and they came upon some recent financial struggles within the 2000s, early 2000s, which actually caused some of the sports to close down, but they still do have women's and men's basketball at the time. And some famous alumni is Mary McLeod Bethune. And her name, Bethune, she actually founded and started Bethune-Cookman. She used to be an advisor to Franklin D. Roosevelt. And before Bethune-Cookman became what it is today, it was a school she had started for blacks in Daytona Beach, something on a small scale, and it eventually grew, as I said, to Bethune-Cookman. So a lot of history right there in those 2 universities that a lot of people probably never heard about until today. But that just is a testament to us as African Americans. That's my school for the day.
All right, man. I ain't gonna lie to you. I love doing these HBCU shout outs because I just love learning about the history of these schools and just seeing how far they've come over the last 130, 140 years. It just really shows you the resiliency and the fortitude that, Black people have had over the years to make sure that, we're always going to look out for each other no matter what. And I hope that, we as a people start to really appreciate HBCUs more and just how far they've come and how much further they can go. But the two schools I'll be doing today, the first one is Grambling State University, located in Grambling, Louisiana. Grambling State University opened on November 1st, 1901, as the Colored Industrial and Agriculture School. It was founded by the North Louisiana Colored Agriculture Relief Association, organized in 1896 by a group of African-American farmers who wanted to organize and operate a school for African-Americans in their region of the state. In response to the association's request for assistance, Tuskegee Institute's own Booker T. Washington sent Charles P. Adams to help the group organize an industrial school. Adams went on to eventually become the school's first president. In 1946, the school became Grambling College, named after P.G. Grambling, a white sawmill owner who donated the parcel of land where the school was constructed. Some alumni from Grambling State include former Washington football team quarterback Doug Williams, who was the first African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl title. Nice. Erykah Badu, E40, and 8-time Arnold bodybuilding champion Ronnie Coleman. And another fun fact about Grambling is, so their football team over the years have had 115 players drafted into the NFL.
Whoa.
So
is that like
Grambling
the most of any HBCU?
That's the most I've seen so far. Out of the schools we've researched, that is definitely the most I've seen so far.
That's great.
And of course, Doug Williams being one of the most accoladed alumni from Grambling State. So shout out to Grambling State University for that. And then the second school I'll be shouting out is Morgan State University. It's located in Baltimore, Maryland. Morgan State was founded in 1867 as the Centenary Biblical Institute by the Baltimore Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church. The institution's original mission was to train young men in ministry. It subsequently broadened its mission to educate both men and women as teachers. The school was renamed Morgan College in 1890 in honor of the Reverend Littleton Morgan, the first chairman of his board of trustees, who donated the land to the college. Morgan State remained a private institution until 1939. That year, the state of Maryland purchased the school in response to a state study that determined that Maryland needed to provide more opportunities for its black citizens. Alumni include our very own Dr. Brian Maiden, who has made a couple appearances on the show. Former NFL player Willie Lanier. Actress Monique, and actor Lester Spite, who was a former football player and actor as well. And here's a really fun fact about Morgan State University. So since 1950, at least one player has gone to the NFL every decade from Morgan State.
Wow.
And as recently as 2019, they had a offensive lineman drafted in the 7th round from Morgan State back in 2019. They've had a total of 41 players play in the NFL with 36 drafted. So for our young listeners out there who are in high school, if you go to Morgan State, there is a chance that at least one of these years in the decade you can get drafted and go to the NFL or play in the NFL. They haven't broke their record since 1950. Absolutely. And it's crazy because, we never played Morgan State, but, I definitely kept up with a lot of the HBCU schools when I was playing. And don't get me wrong, Morgan State wasn't one of the most successful schools in the MEAC, but just to see that that pipeline that they've created from the 1950s and how somehow, some way, they still managed to at least get somebody into the league every decade is just phenomenal. And a testament to the school's tradition of getting players recognized and getting players out there. So shout out to Morgan State, and up to you, Dr. Pitts.
So I wanted to, before I give my shout outs real quick, I wanted to piggyback on something you said. It's like you were reading my mind. I was thinking this morning too that I absolutely love doing these shout outs. For one of the reasons you said, and then I'm gonna add another one, is that this history is so robust. And let's keep it real. This history is not being taught in schools across America. It's not. So Black and brown children are not getting this information in the history class in their high school programs. And, let's face it, Black History Month, February, can I just go ahead? You know how I get down. This country was built on the blood, sweat, tears, and literally the backs of Black and brown men and women that were enslaved. So forgive me if I'm not really, dancing a jig and doing backflips and cartwheels about the fact that we have a month. Ooh, we have a month.
And the shortest month out of all that.
Right. And then we get the shortest month. But what I'm really excited about is that we are presenting this information to our global listening audience, and we are putting this information out there for our Black and brown children, our Black and brown scholar and student athletes. And just like we each have said that we're learning new stuff every week, guess what? The parents, the adults, there's professional athletes out there that don't know some of this information that we're sharing. So I'm excited about the educational component of this. The other thing that I wanted to add is that this is an empowering amount of information, because what it says to Black and brown children all across the nation and all around the world, when we look at not just the rich history of the HBCU family, but when we look at these notable alum, what it says to these children is that they too can achieve greatness and excellence no matter what circumstance they're coming from. It is possible to rise above your immediate circumstances and do extraordinary things. Don't let society tell you, don't let your circumstances tell you that you cannot achieve greatness and excellence because of the color of your skin or because of where you come from, because that is simply not the truth. And we are sharing information with you week in and week out that affirms that you can achieve greatness. My shout-outs are Fisk University and Hampton University. Fisk University, in 1865, barely 6 months after the end of the Civil War and just 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, three men, John Ogden, the Reverend Eratus Milo Kravis, and the Reverend Edward P. Smith established the Fisk School in Nashville, Tennessee. The school was named in honor of General Clinton B. Fisk of the Tennessee Freedmen's Bureau, who provided the new institution with facilities in former Union Army barracks near the present site of Nashville's Union Station. In these facilities, Fisk convened its first classes on January 9, 1866. The first students ranged in age from 7 to 70, but shared common experiences of slavery and poverty and an extraordinary thirst for learning. This university is a private historically Black university, and its 40-acre campus is a historic district listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Fisk is ranked number 6 among historically Black universities, according to U.S. News and World Report, and is the oldest institution of higher learning in Nashville, Tennessee. Fisk's outstanding faculty and students continue to enhance the university's international reputation for academic excellence, and they are part of Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. Notable alumni, the illustrious former Senator John Lewis, W.E.B. Du Bois, editor and journalist, Ida B. Wells, journalist and women's rights activist, former D.C. Mayor Marion Barry, Nikki Giovanni, activist and poet, Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's Pops, actress Kim Whitley, from Sister, and a whole bunch of other movies and TV shows, and former NFL defensive back for the Buffalo Bills, Robert James. My second shout out goes to Hampton University. Hampton University is a private historically black university in Hampton, Virginia. It was founded in 1868 by black and white leaders of the American Missionary Association after the American Civil War to provide education to freed men. It is home to the Hampton University Museum, which is the oldest museum of the African diaspora in the United States and the oldest museum in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In 1878, it established a program for teaching Native Americans that lasted until 1923. It is classified among R2 doctoral universities, which simply means it is a high research activity university. I love its motto, the standard of excellence and education for life. It is a member of the Big South Conference. Notable alumni, Booker T. Washington, Kelly Wells, who is an Olympic bronze medalist for the women's 100-meter hurdles, Alberta Williams King, mother of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mary Jackson, as we know, the NASA African-American mathematician and aerospace engineer depicted in Hidden Figures, comedian Wanda Sykes, Sylvia Trent Williams, acting Surgeon General of the United States, DJ Envy of Power 105.1, NBA players Jasmine Cowan, Devin Green, and Rick Mahorn. They were former players. Former NFL players Cordell Jerome Taylor he played for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Seattle Seahawks, and he's actually now the secondary coach for Hampton University. So again, Ronnie, remember you said a couple of weeks ago, our HBCUs should never be broke. There just simply should not be any HBCUs closing down because they don't have no money.
And Hampton is definitely on that short list of schools that should never have financial problems. I mean,
never,
just for them being a private school.
Ever.
And I really applaud the private HBCUs in the country because, especially with this pandemic that's been going on, it's one thing, like, for example, before the pandemic had started, Virginia State was actually awarded, a good large amount of money from the state of Virginia. Unfortunately, that's been put on pause, and I think they're going to actually continue to allocate that money sometime next year. But as far as like Virginia Union is a private school and Hampton is a private school. So I applaud those schools for being able to, group in their alumni and make sure that they're going to be protected and taken care of through this pandemic and going forward. So, shout out to all the private HBCUs out there. But yes, Hampton and Fisk are two schools that should not have any issues getting money from alumni.
And Howard is Howard private or public?
I think Howard's public.
I'm not sure.
Was that?
Did we shout them out yet? Look,
I think you shouted them out the first week.
Yeah, it's about the first week.
Yeah, I don't remember if I said they were private or public, but they got mad loot. They got so much daggone.
Before you continue, real quick before you continue, Dr. Pitts, as you were talking about earlier, how it's important that we have this education at HBCUs. I just want to shout out a quick plug to Virginia State University for being the first HBCU and college university in the country to offer a course on the history of HBCUs. I think that's something that all HBCUs should incorporate going forward in the next year or so, having a course on that. And it should be, at least a required course as an elective because, like we were saying, and as we get ready to talk about, our discussions today, being able to understand the history of these schools and understanding why it's a good choice to go to these schools and the alumni and the connections that these schools have to offer. We don't know these things as high schoolers or, growing up in, wherever you're from, unless you have somebody who went to a HBCU and, loved that HBCU and spreads that knowledge. Yeah. This is all information that's just unheard of to a majority of people.
Yeah. They should put that in high schools.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As an elective.
Yeah. Instead of just naming these high schools after Martin Luther King and Barack Obama and George Washington Carver and things like that, let's actually have some real history for these schools instead of just giving them a name. And then the school can barely even stay open or have adequate resources for the kids to even get an adequate education in those schools to begin with.
That's right. That's right. We need to be funneling. We need to be funneling our kids to HBCUs.
Yeah.
All right, Jared. Let's get into this HBCU experience. Let's sell them.
We already on top of the HBCU experience, as y'all can tell, but we really going to focus strictly just on the experience, and we want to emphasize the importance of being at a HBCU, being a young African American, male or female, and then even possibly we could talk about from a different race and being on HBCU campus. What importance does it have to them as they mature and grow and go into life? Yeah. And some people say going to a HBCU is not the real world, and that's one of the knocks that a lot of people give. And believe it or not, a lot of some African Americans that may be in a place of prominence from a PWI even frown upon their children going to HBCUs, but they're saying that because they've never stepped on campus. And myself, I've never stepped on an HBCU campus until going into my senior year of high school. It was Virginia State. Shout out to Ronnie.
Giving that love.
Right. That was my first time hearing about the HBCU. And I just want to say, and we can all share our reason for going to an HBCU. I think that's important too. I didn't plan to go to an HBCU. It was never in the forefront of my mind. It was not something that I dreamed about, especially playing a sport. So I was kind of, reserved on making that decision. But at the end of the day, in junior college, they came calling, and once I got there, I'm definitely pro HBCU to the end. I'm happy that some of my family, like my cousins or, nieces, actually thinking of going to an HBCU now, mainly because of Kamala Harris, literally being on that platform that Dr. Pitts mentioned, showing us that we can do so many things. So I think, to get into it, I think we should probably just say why did you go to an HBCU? And then we can, go more into the conversation, the benefits, the importance, the meaning of everything like that.
So for me, and Jared, I'm kind of like you. Up until I had, signed my letter of intent to go to Virginia State University, I had never, imagined going to an HBCU. And I'll be completely honest with you. Until I had signed my letter of intent to Virginia State, I didn't even know what an HBCU was, or what they were, or it was never talked about. Even when I went on my visit, because I went on visits to Virginia State, Hampton, Norfolk State, and a couple other HBCUs. It was, it was just kind of like, it was a school. It was kind of just another college, and so when I had, and for people who aren't familiar with Virginia State and things like that, for me, I literally live 0.9 miles from Virginia State University, and I've been that close to it since I was 8 years old. And I never stepped foot on campus until my first visit there to meet with the coaches and stuff.
Are you serious, Ronnie?
I'm dead serious, because it was.
You could throw a rock and hit the campus and you never even snuck on campus for a party?
So did your parents go to HBCU?
My parents didn't go to HBCUs at all. My dad, when he was in high school, he got recruited by some HBCUs. He got recruited by Virginia State and Virginia Union, but he took the military route. And to be quite honest, when we had moved out here, my parents really didn't know anybody in the area. So, it was kind of like me making those establishments and connections and networking, from middle school all the way up through high school and stuff. But even then, like, the stigma around Virginia State was, it's a college that's here in Chesterfield County in Virginia, and that's about it. Nobody really spoke about it. Only time the news ever covered anything for Virginia State was if there was a shooting around the campus, or, there was some type of violence going on around campus, which, I always found that interesting, because there literally can be a shooting 2 miles from campus, and they'll sit there and say, shooting located near Virginia State University's campus. Wow. And I'm just like, bro, that's nowhere near close to it. So, growing up, my thoughts and views on Virginia State was kind of like, it's a school there, that's kind of like a last resort school. And, so they were, like I said, they were at the bottom of my map. But at the end of the day, Virginia State was the only school out of all the schools that recruited me. And I had D1, D2, and D3 schools. They were the only one to give me a full ride. And I took it and ran with it. And, you know, like I thought it was the greatest decision I ever made in my life. You know, I really, you know, came to know more about HBCUs, more about, you know, just black people because, you know, even though I am of biracial makeup and things like that, you know, I went to a school where it was predominantly white. It was like maybe 70-30 or maybe 80-20 more realistically. So, you know, and I got along with everybody. I got along with white kids, black kids, Asian kids, Spanish kids. Didn't matter. I got along with everybody. But Virginia State was where I really felt home. And for me, I always identify with my black side. I know I am white, but I do identify with my black side more. So, you know, going to a place like Virginia State and really understanding the history and culture of, you know, just all the different, you know, shades of black people and people of color, I don't trade that experience for anything else in the world.
I have a question on, like, being biracial and, you know, most importantly, white and black. Like, what was your expectation? Was there any kind of, like, fear when you went to an HBCU? Because there's some kids that are biracial, white and black, and they may be uncomfortable going to an HBCU, mainly because they probably, you know, associate more with the white side of the family, depending on the family dynamic. And I think that's some reasons why some of them don't choose to go to HBCU because they're not comfortable. But, I mean, I had biracial teammates, biracial students, and, I mean, you was black, you know what I'm saying? And we treated you as us. There was no discrimination or anything like that. But I know somebody who was like kind of on the fence about that and, you know, what they appear to be and being uncomfortable going to HBCU. So it was easy for you, you would say?
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that because, you know, I love all my teammates to death. But to my teammates, I was the white boy on the team, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know, I was the white boy of the team. And we had another kid who was biracial. And so we were the two white boys on the team until we actually had a white kid that, you know, came and played punter and kicker for us. So, you know, it was just good-hearted fun. I never took it personal and stuff because it was like, well, I mean, I am white, so it ain't like they're lying or making anything up. I am white. So, but, you know, they saw me as another black kid, you know, and 9 times out of 10, you know, unless I told somebody I was biracial, I mean, honestly, I get mistaken more for Hispanic than I do even for just being biracial, which I don't know why, you know, my friends are jokesters and things like that. So I get more mistaken for, you know, being Hispanic than I even do biracial. But no, I will say this though, my freshman year at State was probably the hardest year. And it wasn't because of, you know, just being around a whole bunch of black people. That was a culture shock. I'll be honest with you. It was different because, you know, you walk out your dorm room, it's black people. You walk in the caf, it's black people. You walk in the class, it's black people. Like, it was just black. So it was really...
People serving the food.
It was different.
You say I see black people everywhere.
Everywhere. The only people who weren't black were most times the teachers in the classroom, and they were either Indian or you know, Middle Eastern or something like that. So, you know, it was just, I mean, people of color were everywhere. So it was different because the only white people you saw on campus was, you know, maybe a couple police officers or the baseball players or the softball players, and that was it. So, you know, but as far as did I feel different? Did I feel like an outcast? No, not at all. I felt at home, and you know, that's the sense I got from my first visit going to Virginia State was I felt at home, and of course, people were, well, you only live a mile away from campus. Yeah, but when I was on campus, because I lived on campus the first 2 years, and I felt like I was miles away from home because campus life was just completely different than just commuting to campus. But it did take about a good year to adjust to. And, you know, also being in the dorm room as a freshman, you know, you also see a lot of people in their hygiene. And that was probably the biggest shock to me was like just how, you know, some people just, you know, they get out their parents' house and they just do what they want to do. You know, I've seen some, you know, very dirty rooms my freshman year. But no, I being around that many black people for the first time was not something I hated. I actually loved it, but it definitely took a good year to adjust to.
Wow.
Dr. Pitts, I know you had just spent your run at a PWI before HBCU, right?
No, I actually went to an HBCU first and then went to a PWI. So Howard University was my family's first pick for me, but it wasn't my first pick. My first pick was a PWI. And to Ronnie's point, because I come from a culturally diverse family, and at that point in time in my life, a very, very, very culturally diverse area, back in the 70s and 80s, where I'm from in South Jersey was predominantly white. So, and you all know what the stigma is in our communities. When you speak correctly and you walk a certain way and carry yourself a certain way and dress a certain way, we have a tendency of accusing.
Why are you talking white?
Yeah, why you talking white? Why you acting white? She want to be white. So I've received that maltreatment literally my whole life in the social sector of my life. So going to Howard University, I remember, and don't judge me or criticize me because of my cultural immaturity. But back then it felt militant to me. And it was very uncomfortable for me. It was too much blackness for me. I was just like, oh my God. It was culture shock for me. Now, what I think is hilarious is that at 53 years of age, people think I'm militant. So it's like, I've gone the polar opposite. I went from being, experiencing what felt like culture shock to me, being around too many black people, to now people think I'm militant. It's hilarious to me. Like, I have friends that accuse me of being Angela Davis. I'm like, shut up. I am not. But what made me decide to return to an HBCU to finish my undergraduate degree was maturity. It was maturity. It was wisdom. It was a depth of understanding that gave me a far healthier appreciation for who I am as a woman of color that I just didn't have the maturity to understand at 18 years of age going off to college. I am, anybody that knows Dr. Pitts now knows I live, breathe, and die family and education and cultural awareness and sensitivity. And I pride myself on making sure that our people, Black and brown people all across the nation and all around the world, are educated, are informed with the appropriate amount of information that they can make a well-informed decision that is not only going to enhance them personally and professionally, but that's also going to enhance them culturally. And I believe that making the mature decision, the wise decision to complete my undergraduate degree at an HBCU informed my ability to be able to do this work more effectively.
No, I totally agree. And it's like one of the things we're going to HBCU, and you could just Google notable alumni, and this scratches the surface because they're going to give you the alumni, most likely in the entertainment industry, but the alumni we read off on a weekly basis is people that are still doing phenomenal things in their life. And, when you look at the list, it provides inspiration. And I think, like, when you go to a HBCU, you get inspiration versus, I didn't go to a PWI, but I'm pretty sure as an African-American male, I wouldn't be as inspired walking on campus, not seeing or hearing about alumni that went to that university that look like me, talk like me, experience the same exact things that I experienced if I'm pulled over by the cop. Those type of things. I feel that's one of the most important things for me when I went to HBCU. And then seeing people act in a way that the media does not portray African Americans. It's usually ignorant or, they want to say ragged or ghetto, all that stuff. But when you're on the HBCU campus, yes, you have fun. You know what I'm saying? It's college. You have fun. But you get to see on a daily basis the professionalism, dress. I think it was on Wednesdays, everyone would dress up, certain programs. So you really get to see a different side of African Americans coming from whatever environment you came from. And another thing I just want to say for young people out there, if you're not able to go visit the HBCU physically, go on YouTube and you can pull up campus tours, and you can really see that the campus is, the campuses are beautiful. Some of the best, are well managed. You really have to put your foot forward and just take a look at HBCU. I guarantee if you do that, and especially if you get on campus and don't go for no homecoming, you're really gonna be stuck, and you're really gonna want to go.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Come on. I think just exposing our youth to that is gonna help, and just the beneficial factor of finding out alumni went to the school. I mean, you look at all these people: Wanda Sykes, Yolanda Adams, Brandy Jackson from American Idol. I never knew he went to HBCU. Yeah. But this whole time, I was watching American Idol when I was younger, and there was an HBCU alumni right there. Imagine if I had knew that then it could have changed my thinking. Like, hey, he did this. I can do that same thing if I, decide to go to a HBCU. And I'm just I'm just happy. I'm impressed. Like I said, I'm continually inspired, and it makes me want to be great and want me to have the chance to put my name next to theirs as a notable alumni when it's said and done.
Good. Look, Google Bowie State University notable alum Jared Johnston. Google Virginia State notable alum Ronnie Ransome. Google Morgan State University and Virginia State University Dr. Brian Maiden. Google Edward Waters College Dr. Lauren Pitts. Indeed. Yep.
And that's what it makes you do. Like it's a certain standard that I believe you're held to. Coming from HBCU, like I see my former, classmates that I was on campus with, and them doing great things. It makes me want to do that. You know what I'm saying? It's a healthy competition, for HBCU.
And one of the things I also want to highlight is another reason why I'm glad I went to HBCU, and I think both of you all can understand this and relate to it as well. And I think this is why, especially when me and my wife have kids, a HBCU, if they choose to go to college, will definitely be one of the top choices. Is I'm a history buff. And so, for me, I went to public schools, kindergarten through 12th. And, in Virginia, Virginia is, the beginning of the southern states and the beginning of the Confederacy and things like that. So, when they talk about history of African Americans in Virginia, when I got to Virginia State and I took a history course my first semester, I was pissed off when I really started to learn the history of African Americans and where we come from and the things we accomplished, even before we were brought over here. Because, I mean, the information I was exposed to and the things we talked about, I mean, it blew my mind that I never knew this stuff about black people growing up. I mean, the public education system, as far as it goes to history, and I always tell people, those who don't know the history are doomed to repeat it. It's his story, Ronnie. It's his story, not our story. Absolutely. And if there's one thing I'm grateful for my football career and things like that, but as far as education goes, if there's one thing I'm absolutely grateful for about going to a HBCU, it's just the history I received while I was there that I would have never known had I went to University of Maryland or University of Richmond or, one of these PWIs where, these things aren't taught. And if they are taught, it's a subsection of history that's probably taught by, a professor who really is just using a through, the PWI system, but when I was at Virginia State, shout out to my professor, Dr. Zoe Spencer, who is a sociology professor at Virginia State, but she focuses on the history of African Americans through, through sociology and things like that. And I'm forever grateful for that, just the history I learned from going to a HBCU. I will never forget that. And even for my clients, and I know this might not sound, right, but for my clients, when they're struggling with school and stuff, if they're struggling with history, I tell them the truth, and the teachers always get upset because, like, well, that's not true. And I'm like, oh, no, this is true. I can show you how, why, when, and where.
Facts.
That curriculum you're teaching them, that ain't no real truth. And,
not ours
it's
anyway.
Crazy even for our youth. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you said it's not no real truth. I said not ours anyway.
Not at all. And, so I encourage people of all color, black, whatever other color you are. I highly encourage you go to a HBCU and really learn the true history of our people and where we come from and the things we accomplished and the things we've done. Not just in the last 400 years like everybody likes to talk about, but the last 1,000 years, and how in Western Africa, those are the oldest civilizations in the world, over 150,000 years old. Those civilizations have found a way to survive through all the ice ages, through all the plagues, through all the pandemics that have been throughout history. Those civilizations in West Africa have survived all of those for the last 150,000 years. That's not by accident, and it's not by accident that a lot of PWIs in the systemic racism that goes on in this country tries to hide the information from our youth and from just black and brown people, period.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Go ahead, Jared. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'm just sitting back, listening and taking myself out of the equation, and it's just amazing the impact that HBCUs have. And I know, Dr. Pitts, you got stats on that. You want to share some of that with the audience?
I do. So shout out to Dr. Michael Lomax, who is the president and CEO of the United Negro College Fund. They did this powerful report, and I just wanted to share with our listeners some highlights from this report. Dr. Lomax says, with a college education now so essential to Americans' economic well-being, the United Negro College Fund's mission is as vital as it has ever been, and HBCUs continue to play a central role in that mission. These crucial institutions not only help their students build better futures, but they also contribute to economic progress throughout the country. The message is clear. HBCUs matter to students, employers, communities, and the nation. And then, so this report is available online. It's in a PDF. All you got to do is Google UNCS, and it's called HBCUs Make America Strong, the positive economic impact of historically black colleges and universities. But he breaks this report down to the past, the present, the past and the present. And he talks about, in the past section, only a few colleges dedicated to educating African American students were in existence before the Civil War. After the war, and through the efforts of missionary societies, the Freedmen's Bureau, as I touched on in my shout out to Fisk, the Freedmen's Bureau and African American churches, these institutions began to proliferate. It would take decades and new federal law before states were required to provide African Americans as well as whites with access to higher education. Then he touches on in the present. Today, there are 101 accredited HBCUs, public and private, concentrated in 19 states and the District of Columbia and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Y'all ready? They enroll almost 300,000 students, approximately 80% of whom are African American, and 70% are from low-income families. The value of HBCUs is not confined to economic impacts. Consider, too, their disproportionate success at helping African American college students earn bachelor's degrees and more. In 2014, for example, HBCUs accounted for only 3% of public and not-for-profit institutions receiving federal student aid. Enrolled 10% of African American college students nationwide, accounted for 17% of the bachelor's degrees earned by African Americans, and 24% of the degrees earned by African Americans in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. HBCUs also provide a solid basis for an even higher academic achievement. According to the National Science Foundation, the top 8 institutions where African American PhDs in science and engineering earned their bachelor's degrees from 2002 to 2011 were all HBCUs. And let me just tell you, I told y'all before, it took me 17 years to complete my bachelor's degree. So I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2007. So I fall as a doctoral student, as someone that now holds a doctoral degree, I fall in that stat that he referenced. HBCUs continue to be a best buy, achieving positive outcomes at an affordable cost to students. In addition, most HBCUs are located in the Southeast, and near areas with relatively low levels of economic well-being, where generating economic activity is particularly important. He goes on to highlight that total economic impact of HBCU spending, $14.8 billion of impact annually. Total employment impact, 134,090 jobs. Total lifetime earnings for graduates, $130 billion. Why does any HBCU have to close? Because they don't have any money. Why? 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 And then he goes on to touch on who benefits from HBCUs. HBCUs clearly benefit the students who attend them and the entire nation, which makes use of the valuable skills these graduates bring to the workplace. HBCUs benefit the communities in which these institutions are located and the wider regions that serve them in other ways as well. They act as significant drivers of essential economic activity both on and off campus. The numbers are compelling. Investing in HBCUs pays large and lasting dividends for all of us. Staggering, right?
That's great information right there.
Facts right there for anybody doubting HBCUs or unfamiliar. That's powerful right there. Then there's another study. There was an annual enrollment of only 3,000 students. Let me see. This is according to bestschools.org. But basically, they're saying Xavier University educates more black doctors than any other school in the nation.
Wow.
Like, if I'm looking from an outside perspective, I would not, not knowing about HBCUs, I'm going years back, I would not say HBCU has their hand in creating that amount of black doctors. I just wouldn't have said it until, you do your research, you get on campus, and you see it for yourself. And that's just feel that we're blind. Like, all of the stuff that you just mentioned, I had no idea. Like, the economic impact that HBCUs have. And the earning power, over the lifespan of an HBCU graduate. Because I know we're told all the time, and I might have heard it when I was in high school, but HBCU degree was shunned upon. But now you see a lot of companies are going for minority, a lot of minority females, and a lot of them are targeting HBCUs. I know Microsoft just made a statement about 2 or 3 weeks ago saying they're going to be looking for minority CEOs in the future. Where do you think they're going to go? They're not going to go get a minority CEO from Virginia Tech University. They're going to go to HBCU because they know that's where prominent African Americans come from.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's huge. It is absolutely positively huge, and I'm going to say it and keep saying it. House Talk Pregame, we're a funnel. We are a funnel. We have a global listening audience that is climbing well over 500,000 strong around the world, nationally and internationally. And that means that we have the ear of a lot of people. We have a platform that can be instrumental in not only educating and empowering, but in being a voice for our HBCU family that educates, empowers, and illuminates the benefits of the HBU experience, that positions ourselves to be a conduit for Black and brown children all over this nation and all around the world. That and both of you made the point, that gets this information out there, that bops them in the forehead and says, hey, boom, 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 boom. Have you considered an HBCU? Because we know that this information is not coming forth in the public school system. And let's face it, in a lot of the private school settings as well, particularly maybe those private school settings that have, charter schools that have a large Black and brown student body population, in various cities around the country. But the vast majority of public and private school systems are not providing this information for Black and brown students. And it is imperative. I am of the persuasion that how can you possibly know where you're going if you don't know where you are coming from and even where you are? And if an entire part of your lineage, an entire part of your history is missing, then you are making decisions in your life from a limited perspective. I believe that getting as much information as one can is paramount in helping individuals to make well-informed decisions. So that's what we are. We're a conduit. We are providing this information to our global listening audience to flood the airwaves with this information because it's important. It is important for folks to know that we have power. We have power that people don't even realize that we have. We hail from kings and queens. We come, and Ronnie said it, but we hail from the most resilient continent in the world. The continent of Africa is, extraordinary, absolutely, positively extraordinary. And if we as a people can learn to use our powers for good instead of for evil, we have the ability to transform this nation and the world. And I don't feel that I'm overstepping my bounds or being an extremist by saying that. I believe that we have much more power than we have learned to yield as a people. And I believe that society designed it that way. Absolutely.
I saw, Diddy was saying, why he chose to go to the HBCU, and he was talking about how he never traveled out of New York City as a kid, and he was saying he never was at a place where he experienced so many different acts and so many different types of people. And he said it was just important for him to go to a school where he was going to be exposed to new things. And that's another thing when Dr. May came on a couple of weeks ago and talked about going to HBCU. That's another thing to emphasize. Just because you're going to be around people that look like you, you're going to meet people who are totally different in so many different ways. That's going to help you. And it's going to help you be able to adapt once you do go into the real world. Even if you are in a position where you're not around as many Black people as the HBCU, you'll learn much more about yourself. And Wanda Sykes, she had originally went to Western Michigan University. And she said she felt lost because there was nobody there that looked like her. It was a culture shock. And she said everyone around her was not African American. And then that's why she chose to for HBCU. And, that just speaks volume. Those are people who are doing great things, and they saw the benefit, in an HBCU that's going to help them 10, 15, 20 years down the line, opposed to a PWI.
Check this out, y'all. I have you said something, Jared, that just is like ding 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 ding. So we've talked briefly on previous shows about the fact that I'm a Fulbright scholar, an alumni Fulbright ambassador, and on the Fulbright specialist roster. And as a professor, I teach students from all over the world, and when I look at the Black and brown students that I'm teaching from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, from Brazil, from Peru, from Singapore, from the UK. Like I have a Black student that's from the UK. From, goodness gracious, I have, when you look at my entire student body across all of the sections that I teach, I have probably 10 to 15 countries that are represented where I'm teaching Black and brown students. And I have white students too, but I have Black and brown students from all over the world, that my education and training and cultural sensitivity that came from being formally educated at an HBCU has equipped me to be able to relate. And I think about a conversation that I had with my supervisor last week, and he talked about pivoting. And what he meant by pivoting is, because, the institution of higher learning that I teach for is United States based, a lot of the discussions that we have on class, and I teach a systems and society class. I teach system and society classes, and a lot of our discussion is U.S. centric, right? And we talked about how to pivot that. And so what I do is, say, for example, if we're talking about injustice and inequality, what does that look like in Nigeria? What does that look like in Singapore? What does that look like in Brazil? What does that look like in Haiti? What does that look like in Jamaica? Because here's the thing. Even though we have all of these countries all over the world where Black and brown persons live and are being educated and trained, there's also injustice and inequality. Why? Because there's a dominant culture that's present, right? So the HBCU experience has enhanced my cultural sensitivity and my ability to connect with them in a way that is empathetic and informing, because not only am I informing them, but they're informing me. So there's this amazing cultural exchange, because, yes, I'm a woman of color, but I don't know what it's like to live in Nigeria and to be oppressed. You know what I mean? Yes, I'm a woman of color, but I don't know what it's like to be a person of color living in Singapore, experiencing, injustice and inequality and political rhetoric and craziness. So it is this amazing, amazing cultural exchange that one can experience on an HBCU campus, because there's this convergence of this cultural melting pot that among Black and brown people, but also among people like, Ronnie said, of Asian descent, of European descent, or whomever. That's just extraordinary. So go ahead, Jared. You had some stuff you wanted to add too.
Yeah, so there's interesting facts, as we giving y'all the truth and the facts, straight up. There was a study done by the Erie Institution of Education Sciences, and they said that attending for African American attending an HBCU, there's an actual 15.8 higher expectancy to graduate in 6 years compared to those that attend a PWI. So going to a HBCU as an African American student, you're 15.8% more likely to graduate. And that's going to have a long-lasting effect on you and the way you raise your family, where you live at, the quality of your life, and everything's going to be affected by PWI HBCU. And then they also did a study that showed that a Black student attending a PWI can lead to severe health ailments. Weathering the cumulative effects of living in a society characterized by white dominance and privilege produces a kind of physical and mental wear and tear that contributes to a host of psychological and physical ailments. And they were saying, so can racism cause a Black student attending a PWI to really develop ailments such as diabetes, heart disease, depression, suicidal thoughts, and or hair loss? And this study confirms that that's true. So attending a PWI, you know what I'm saying? It's traumatic. And then they talked about how, our student athletes who attend PWIs, they are not nurtured and cared for as a person. They're more so looked at as a piece of meat while they're on that campus of a PWI. And that's true. It also builds on pressure that is on the back of that student athlete. They feel isolated. They feel alone while they're on that campus. So we have to start thinking, it's more than just having that name next to you or having that name on a sheet of paper from Ohio State versus a Morehouse or anything like that. But it digs deeper to your mental health and your health, as they mentioned, diabetes and suicidal thoughts and things like that is much deeper. And we have to realize that and really take that as, something that's of importance, to us as we go on to live, long, prosperous lives.
It's systemic. When I think about, and it's like I had not thought about it, Jared, until just now when you shared that information. So when I, remember I told you my family's first pick for me was, they wanted me at an HBCU, and my first pick school was a PWI. When I transferred to the PWI, one of the things that my family was freaking out about is because the geographic area that I was in was a very large skinhead presence. Y'all remember the skinheads? It's a white supremacist group. It's sort of like a spinoff of the KKK, right? And we, I will say in defense, I'm not going to get into where I went, but I will say that because it was such a problem where we were located geographically, that campus personnel made sure that as Black and brown students that we were aware that this was a problem, and we were instructed to embrace safety in numbers. As Black and brown students, we were never, ever, ever supposed to go anywhere out in the community by ourselves, day or night, because there was such a large presence of skinheads in that geographic region. So you talk about, the traumatic experience of it all, but systemically that was stressful for my family too, right? Because they're back here in Jersey wondering whether or not I'm going to come up missing, whether or not they're going to get a phone call saying we can't find her, and then they find me hanging from a tree somewhere or beat to death or gang raped or something. So it's definitely it's problematic. I think that it is important for our listening audience to know that what we're trying to say, what we've tried to share with you today, is that there are extraordinary, extraordinary benefits that come from the HBU experience. And particularly now, more than ever before, family unity is paramount. I really appreciated what both of you said about, and Jared, you shared the stats on the higher graduation rate. I don't know all of what that report shared, but I will tell you what my experience was. Because I was around so many people whose experience was comparable to mine in so many ways, I was not permitted to give up. I looked at my HBU experience like the three-legged race of life. I had this institution that was the center leg, that was bound and determined, and educators that were wholeheartedly committed to me graduating. And my classmates, whether it was study groups or an encouraging word or experiencing a death or a loss, I was a single parent, and, classmates offering to keep an eye on Dre or to, just whatever, any way, shape, form, or fashion, making sure that financially, that everything was cool. I was rallied around like they were an extension of my family. And though it took me 17 years to finishing up at an HBCU is why it didn't take me 20 or 25 years to finish my bachelor's degree. They invested in me, they loved on me, they believed in me, and they encouraged me to finish that academic race and to see it through to completion. And that's why I am Dr. Lauren Denise Pitts today. So look, folks, we have shared a wealth of information with you today. I have a call to action for you. I want you to dare to Google African and African American inventors. And I want you to look firsthand, not just at notable alum at these HBCUs, but I want you to educate yourself about just how much this nation has depended on our contribution to make this nation what it is. Until next week, this is House Talk Pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts, Ronnie, and Jared. It's time to go. It's time to go. That hour and a half goes by real fast.
everybody have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Be safe out there. Stay dangerous. And one love.
Yeah. Until next week, we love you. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody. And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Be safe.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.